Grand. So, hello everybody. We're back for episode number 6 of the Inner Monologue podcast. I can't quite believe I'm saying that. Kicking off at the start of the year and having 6 episodes with 6 wonderful yoga and movement professionals. So, on the podcast today, we have Sue Choi. And Sue is based in California, and I have met the wonderful Sue through some yoga courses we've done online, business and some yoga philosophy courses and things we've done online. So, hello, Sue, and
Hello.
welcome on. I hope you're excited. Good. That wasn't too awkward, but I've just made it
It's
awkward. So,
it's really good to be here. I really enjoy your episode and I love your writing, so I'm so honored to be here.
that's great. And actually, Sue's runs a little circle that we'll talk about a bit later on, but she has helped me pick up my digital pen and sometimes unblock my silly writer's block that I get because I'm in the middle of writing out my PhD. So it's really
Mm,
helpful to have somebody encourage you. And actually, it's a really nice bridge of yoga techniques, but we'll come round to that
mm.
at the end. But Sue, so I'd like to just start off with asking how it was that you came to be a yoga teacher. So, what was your
Oh
origin
wow.
story?
Yeah. Big question, isn't
Right in
it?
there.
I, I don't have the traditional background of like, we know a lot of teachers who are dancers, gymnasts, and a kind of very athletic background. I came from nothing like that, absolutely none of them. My mom used to joke about like, I put you in different classes and you were really miserable in every single thing. So that was the kid who I was. So I kind of walked the path of very traditional corporate. I was in corporate for about 15 years before joining the yoga teacher track. But it was more like I kind of had an idea of like I wanted to move the body, and that usually feels good. But I always felt a little awkward, and my hand-eye coordination was always a little off. The way that it started was one day I just wanted to move, but I wanted to hide out from everybody. So I specifically chose the class that was like, I believe it was like 6 o'clock in the morning. And literally there were like two people in the bless the teacher, right? She was holding it for like a good 6 months. And it was like 2 to 3 people, really quiet room. And there's absolutely nobody other than, nobody looking at each other, basically. It was so dark outside. And I started practicing there. And just one thing led to the other that became a part of my practice, even before I started even thinking about becoming a teacher. And then from there, the story of a corporate work is either you stick it out or you burn out. And I was more in the latter camp. So there was a moment where the body and mental all of the stuff kind of snowballed together and I just, well, this is not happening. This is just not working. My body's not well. Brain and emotional capacity not well. So I have to take a break. So I just took a break and thinking that, oh, maybe like 6 months later, I will go back to work in different capacity. And then, usually there's that, people around you. It's like, why don't you just go yoga? Because you usually feel better when you go there. And I was like, yeah, sure, why not? I have nothing else to do during this sabbatical. And I start going and start going and start going. And then, you know how it goes. Like, it just start going, going, going. And you started to feel like, oh, there's something about this that I'm really resonating with it, but I can't verbalize it. I don't know what it is. And then one thing led to the other. Sure, I'll just learn a little bit more about this. And the teacher training was the way to learn more about it. I was never really intending to teach. I'm huge introvert and I just can't think about standing in front of the room like 20 people. That just freaks me out, the idea of it. Even still now, it's just like, how do I do that all the time? But yeah, the one thing led to the other, and teacher training turned into one of my teachers was like, "You might be really good at this. Do you want to try it?" And funny enough, I was like, I never thought that I was good at anything. I could kind of keep up with others, but I never thought I was good at anything, especially the movement, because it was so difficult for me. And then I just started teaching, and here we are. That was about 6.5 years ago. And in the pandemic, it was during the pandemic when I finished the training. So I actually started out teaching online specifically. So I taught for about a year and a half before everything started to open up. And so almost like teaching online is related to that pandemic feeling where everybody was isolated. I was doing the best I could. So it was a little bit of a jump to come back to online teaching, which I love. But it took me a while to come back to this space again. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And like, well, the first thing I just thought there was like, oh, someone goes to the 6 a.m. classes because they're always everywhere. And I'm like, who goes to a 6 a.m. class? But this makes
Oh
sense.
yeah, that
Yeah,
was me.
that was you.
That was me. Me and this other guy. Me and this other guy. But then I think there was a big portion of my practice was hiding out
Yeah,
and not wanting to be seen.
yeah,
But then my teacher saw me, but you know, one of those teachers who sees you but don't.
yeah,
Which was a really interesting thing. Like she didn't come around and overly correct me. She didn't come around and say like, "Oh, good job" or whatever. She just kind of let me do the thing that I do.
yeah,
And then slowly that approach really helped me figure out like, okay, I just hate this warrior two thing. And what other things can I do to, well, maybe skip it, or like what other things can I do to make this a little bit more suitable for my body?
yeah,
And when I met Alex, which was like pretty early in my yoga teaching journey, there was like something about her approach was like, boom, like, oh, I don't have to like this, or I don't have to fit myself into this because my body doesn't do it, right? But so that was a really interesting shift early in my career where I should just look at things differently in terms of like everybody is just looking different and their capacity that day is different, right?
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
where were I? Was
No,
I?
that's good. No, that's great. It's really interesting. And
Where was I? It's gonna happen.
who am I? There's good.
Yeah.
No, that's really interesting because, yeah, like you say about kind of when you have your eyes open to the fact that there's a lot more to the shapes, but maybe, it's building those skills as teachers to, like you said, the teacher that you went to at 6 a.m. She was really good at seeing you and you felt
Or she was
comfortable
sleeping. Or she was
and not
sleeping.
seeing
One or
you.
the
And then
other.
there's this process that we have to go through then as when we become yoga teachers. I thought it was really interesting you say like, I was able to keep up, but clearly you're able to more than keep up. Like corporate yoga teacher, honing your critical evaluation skills, having care. And I think something you said there resonated with me about being an introvert and then having to be on this stage as a yoga teacher. I was literally on a stage with a Brittany mic. I always laugh because when we chat in our
Oh
teachers
yeah.
group, like I taught a class that I named like fitness yoga. And I loved it because I was in the gym. It was like really accessible classes. There's cheap membership. It's a really honest kind of space that was, equalizing in a way. But there was this terror of having to like get on a stage. I just present yourself in front of people. And I wondered, can you touch on anything about what it was about wanting to teach yoga that helps you get over that stage fright of having to do it?
I mean, it's a really weird experience, isn't it? Because you kind of have to I call it quiet down the I'm so introvert, I want to hide in the corner part a little down. And you kind of want to bring out a little bit of um I struggle with this too, and I don't want us to struggle. So there's kind of a little bit of a shift happening, volume change, I call it, because I can't completely ignore the part of me that wants to hide out in the corner for like 3 days. But how I think about it is I don't think of it as like te sure, I'm teaching certain things so that people will learn, but at the same time, I'm not in a traditional presentation or traditional teaching sense where I need to tell people this is the right way to do it, right? It takes away a lot of stress already when I come into that. And then addition like as an introvert, I sometimes just say I'm an introvert. So look, I jokingly tell my students, and these are my regular students, so they understand me. I'm like, don't talk to me 10 minutes before the class. I need to warm up. Talk to me after the class so that
Yeah.
I can work with you. But like before, let me just be. And
Yeah.
I think the saying things out loud really helped me without trying to just hide it. And then approaching it a little differently, saying that I'm not saying the sermon, that's not it. Like it's just like this is a suggestion, and then maybe we can explore. So
Yeah.
that approach really helped me. But if I have Brittany Mike, I don't know, like that's gonna need another 10 minutes of meditation to get
I know.
used to it.
It becomes part of your routine, like you were saying beforehand. Like I'm
Yeah.
I'm hazarding a guess here that perhaps planning plays a large role in your run up to teaching a class. I'm not sure about that. That's certainly my case where I thought, well, I'll just plan it, not to the nth degree, but that provided a little bit of comfort if you're shy or introverted or both.
Yeah,
You know, but I had this routine, like you're saying, like
yeah, yeah,
stereo,
yeah.
get the mic ready, mic belt, come on, da 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 da. Then I would go and
Oh,
study.
there's a belt.
Oh, mic
There's a
was good.
belt.
Was, very
I mean,
professional.
but you have a really good point. The planning part of it, I think coming from, I call like my corporate background a little analytical and very kind of finance driven, like you need to be logical, that kind of a brain that I have. I try to apply that to yoga when I first started teaching, and that any new teachers listening to this, like we've all done this, and there's so much value in it. And I used to write down. I still have those Google Docs pulled together week one, so the of like July, this is the theme, and this is a philosophical, this is a yoga sutra that you're gonna be. But the kind of going through all of the processes and 47-minute mark, you're gonna make a joke, right? So all of those. Um, in reality, does that ever happen? Perhaps not. I think 99% no. But there was a very big comfort in kind of, I also think of it as comfort and organizing your brain about how to go about this if this happens and if that happens. And the process is eventually you'll realize that sure, you prep, but nothing that you expected is going to happen.
Mhm.
Somebody's going to leave the room right away, and you're going to be like hung up on it the whole time. Or this person's going to be doing random things in the back of the corner. And how are you dealing with that, right? So there's a sharing the information and as well as providing the guidance, and at the same time, you reacting as a teacher to the situation. And so I kind of call it as a practice in both ways. So you teach the practice, and at the same time, you practice as much as as much as anybody else, just in a different shape or form. So I find these days, sure, I love planning, and I just have planners everywhere. That's just I think in my DNA, almost like a adopted DNA. Um, but and that gives me definitely a lot of confidence internally, but there's a joy in actually meeting the people and meeting them where they are on that day at that hour. And how do I react to that? And without really digging into that Hermione's bag of like my spreadsheets, because I can't do that anyways, and just go out and see like, okay, I've done this before, I've seen this, and I'm seeing this new things. How do I apply that? I think it's just like a teaching in so many different layers.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing as how we teach like asana, like, okay, this doesn't work, what do I do? This doesn't work, what do I do? And if this doesn't work, can I skip it? So it's all of those thinking process that happens, and hopefully that idea applies to the students and in their everyday practice.
Yeah, I love that. And I was just looking around because in any direction within an arm's reach, I can pick a notebook of a different color or
Yeah.
line
Yeah.
spacing as well.
Yeah.
So,
And,
and
and I wonder if that has to do with my ADHD because I will forget it. So I have
to write
papers
it down.
everywhere, just
Yeah.
like write it down. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, there's something about that, isn't there? I had a look at research. We talk about this kind of in research because obviously writing plays a big role and I've got my laptop here in front of me. I still like to write things down physically and for me there's this connection between like I just have to write it once and then
Hmm.
have the written note in my photographic what I call
Hmm.
my, so there's something about writing it down even when you're not referring to the notes there. So Yeah,
Mhm.
maybe to do with my brain types, for
Mhm.
sure. But then I wondered if
Mhm.
you had a tip for teachers who are maybe a little bit not sure of how they move from planning to like seeing,
Mhm.
they see that what they're aiming to do is to like support their students where what you said where they're at today, which doesn't quite fit sometimes the structure that
Mhm.
you get in the teacher training. And if you could give one or two pieces of guidance for a teacher who's ready to like go off notes,
Yeah.
what's the tip? Have you got a tip?
I mean, part of me wants to say it is the time, but that's not the tip. It's more of
I
a
get it.
general.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, what really helped me was because because when I started teaching in person, it was still in a COVID
yeah.
situation, so wearing mask and Mike doesn't work in that situation. Although we tried really hard, it didn't work. So I had to basically yell
Hmm.
to the room and wearing the mask, everybody wearing the mask, and I wasn't as supposed to walk around, right? So
Yeah,
there was that limitation from the get-go. So what I did a lot was I would probably demo for the students who would not know what I'm talking about, but then I would just sit. And it made me feel so uncomfortable about it. So I guess like there's a theme that we can kind of draw out. If I feel uncomfortable, I just say it.
yes,
By the way,
yeah,
students, I'm going to be sitting for a little bit and just watch you.
yeah,
And then I just made that as a habit of some part of the class I'm just gonna sit and watch or like stand and watch. When the lockdown become a little bit more loose, I was able to walk around and actually see the people in different directions. But it's one of those things that planning and demoing in your body and the kind of creating the words through the body is a comforting place.
yeah,
Um, and it's really hard to not do that. And then I think the tip is like, it's really uncomfortable. Let's just face it, right? Even with the time, it's uncomfortable. And you kind of have to break it down into little pieces. It's like, okay, maybe like I'm a new teacher and I demo a lot, and there's a lot of things in the body, but I know this part really, really well that I'm gonna teach. And I'm just gonna say, hey, I'm just gonna be standing in the back watching you guys. Because as the students get used to that too, right?
yeah,
Students get used to how teachers are orienting themselves. So giving the students an idea of where you're going to be as well as how you're going to be doing. So kind of make it a habitual thing.
yeah,
And the you mentioned that the planning and visualizing, right? For me, I have this thing called aphantasia where I can't visualize things. So when somebody told me the Lord of the Rings, when they read it, they just think of the scenes. I'm like, what? I don't get that.
what are you talking about?
What?
Yeah,
So when I watched the movie, that was like the most phenomenal thing ever. I'm like, wow, that actually exists, right? Harry Potter, that actually exists. So the reason why I'm saying that is a visualization doesn't work for me as a
yeah,
teaching skill. So I had to be in it. So the way of having that feeling of what the whatever movement feels like in the body towards to how to tell people and just watch people how to do that. There was that kind of period of awkwardness where like I'm kind of doing it. It's almost like, there's a music coming around, you're dancing a little bit, but you don't want anybody to know. So I'm watching people, I'm kind of doing it so that I know what
yeah,
what that is like, what the sensation that I'm describing makes sense for them. But then it gets a little better, a little better, a little better. So I think I really love the idea of breaking things down and
yeah.
just saying it out loud. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And yeah, the labeling thing, I think it's really important, not just labeling, a anatomical, fact during an asana, but I just wrote down like the why, the how and the why. And like you say, like, I feel this, but we're just going to go with it. And I think I hadn't realized, so you'd sort of verbalized it, but that's kind of how I approach teaching
Yeah,
for
yeah,
any students
yeah,
listening. We're
yeah.
like, okay, this might be a little bit weird, but trust me, there's method in the
Oh
madness.
yeah,
We're
yeah.
we're going on
I
the
say
journey.
that. so many times, like, by the way, everybody, this is just gonna be a little awkward. Just let's be awkward. Why
Yeah,
not?
let's have a go. Let's, yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
As we were just speaking before about them, Sue's also just done her finals for her reformer Pilates training.
Oh,
Woohoo!
yay.
Yay, well done, Sue. And
Thank you.
when I did my mat Pilates, I was practicing at home in my living room and I was doing rolling like a ball, rolling back and
Oh,
forth on my mat.
gosh.
And I was like, how, as an adult, have I arrived at this moment where I'm literally rolling around like a child, like in my living room, And it was just this such a strange out of body experience. But I think that's kind of part of the joy, a little bit of some of these movement aspects of modalities that
Mhm.
experimenting and coming out of this rigid thing because I was a hatha yoga person and
Mhm.
my teacher was kind of a little bit Iyengar-y. He probably would have done that if he could have done, but we live on a small island. But it was like so structured, it was extremely comforting. But
Mhm.
body doesn't only like to move front and back, side to side. It needs to move in spirals and funny directions, and
And your toes, the
I
Iyengar and the
broken
toes.
toes.
The direction.
So it
Yeah.
was just like this sudden breaking open of something, that had been, so strict and moving off piece becomes this kind of way of exploring and investigating. I think that can be
Hmm.
super enriching. And what you said
Hmm.
there about understanding aphantasia. So I have come across a few students. My brain, I think, is the total opposite of that, which is a little bit annoying when you're trying to sleep and you have this like you mentioned Lord of the Rings, like that's what my dreams are like. And then you wake up and you're just like, I'm
I
so
don't know if I like that.
I was watching that for like 7 hours, So it can have the other things, but understanding that others have different sensory profiles, different neurotypes, different ways of visualizing, memorizing, planning. Suddenly,
Mhm.
this kind of becomes this really rich web of skills that you can learn from other people and
Oh, yeah.
things you
Yeah.
can deploy, that
Yeah.
somebody else
Yeah.
will go, oh, yeah,
Yeah.
rather than sit
Yeah.
there like do you mind me asking then if you did you sit through meditation and or body scans and things and how did you find that to begin with or you don't have to answer but I'm just intrigued. Don't know.
No, no, no. The reason why I'm saying that kind of having this moment is that was that excavating part of the sensational profile type of a thing, like, or is it more like I couldn't feel some of my body and I didn't know that.
Yeah,
So I went to my PT and he's been my PT for a long time. And he knows kind of like the evolution of where I came from. And the first time when he, assessed me to see like what my range of motion was, he said something about engage the mid back. And I'm like, what? What does that mean? I understand the word
yeah, yeah,
and I understand the scapula, I guess ish, shoulder blade he put it.
yeah, yeah.
Like scapula, so he's a shoulder blade together. But like it didn't make sense.
Mhm.
And it didn't make sense for a long time for me. I think part of it was I think I was in this very competitive, fast tech environment where almost having the body feelings is not a good thing because
Yeah,
you kind of have to push through. So there was a really good turn off key for me. So when I go to work in my corporate mode, I would turn that thing off. So it's almost like you don't go to the bathroom, you don't drink, and you just stay there, sit still, and doing the thing for 7 hours, and you come home and pass out. So if you're, I didn't know how to, I knew how to turn off that sensory switch, but I didn't know how to turn it on.
yeah,
So when things started to happen was when I couldn't, one day I just woke up and I just couldn't move my body. I'm like, that's weird. And like this is a typical story of a lot of yoga teachers where they're converts from corporate world is that one day they couldn't do this and they didn't understand why and the doctors couldn't figure it out. Like a lot of it is under your body telling you that you kind of something has to change,
yeah,
but I didn't understand it until that point. And then the rehab part of it was like just slowly understanding, oh, that's my shoulder that used to move and it doesn't move anymore the way that I would like it to be. Or my back, oh, there is a middle back. So I think my approach was, I'm like, what's a middle back? My approach was, I don't think it was intentional necessarily, but it
Yeah,
was more of a coping of the rehab of how I got out of like really restricted movement towards to like somewhat reasonable movement. But then a lot of it was because when you don't feel something, right? This was like one of the advice that I got recently from one of my teachers is that like what would you recommend to do first thing in the morning? And she goes like just touch the grass, touch the living thing,
yeah,
maybe it's a fur thing or some living thing. And so it was a little bit like that for me. I had to touch something. And I had to stand against the wall
yeah,
because I didn't feel the mid back, right? But my mid back was so rounded, so I could touch it.
yeah,
And then that's the way that I got into like how do people understand their body could be all different, but there's that touch
yeah,
that they can do, whether that is the wall, the props, or you just lay down on the floor, and what does that feel like? Or when you're hearing the sound, are you actually hearing the sound or are you hearing the inner sound? Like, a lot of those exploration came from the fact that like, I don't know, when you can't move, you just look at the ceiling and count the whatever dots up there.
yeah,
And what are the things that happen when you some of the movement you can't do anymore, like how do you get out of it? So I think that's kind of how I approach it. So a lot of the times I teach people at the wall if I'm teaching it in person and let them just stand against the wall and see like, is your back rounded? Do you feel the mid back or upper back? So
yeah,
that's how we start. If you lie down on the ground, feet against the wall, do you feel the feet against the wall or like what is it, right? So it's a lot of those questions that I had to ask myself when I didn't feel anything. And it just started to click from there. Yeah.
yeah.
So it's a less of a visual, unfortunately. That's not
No,
how
it's good.
I
No, it
had
really
this.
is. Like, because sometimes, because when you use your brain a lot for your job, and like you say, you just totally ignore your body. And I had a
Mhm.
similar experience. I just had excruciating back and hip pain. So you felt nothing until you felt like, off the charts 11, something that was just not conducive to the actions you'd been taking. But I always think of myself as like a jellyfish. It's like the brain and then these nerves that just sort of dangle into a
And nerves are like all frozen. And they're like, I don't need to do
I know,
anything
yeah, I know.
anymore.
And
This
then
person is somehow surviving with the brain,
and then
right?
feeling
Yeah.
left out, and they're like, we're going to sting you now because we want to
Yeah.
be. But it's really important, and those kind of tactile things that you do, I think
Mhm.
those strategies are so good. I learned some of those. I went to do a specific course for neurological conditions, and they use a lot of these tactile tools, the massage balls on the feet, and towels, and using the walls and chairs. And I think,
Yeah.
I use that with everybody because I think so many of us are doing desk
Mhm.
jobs.
Mhm.
I feel like if it happened to me in a desk job, it's probably a similar situation that's going to be happening to
Exactly.
others.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I really like
Exactly.
that just, yeah, using the things around you. And
Mhm.
then you mentioned there about when you were doing your planning and like, oh, what sutra am I going to be using? And I like to touch a little bit upon how people approach this philosophical element of yoga in their
Mhm.
teaching toolkit. So not specifically what sutra, but how do you approach kind of the yoga philosophical angle?
This is a really, really good question that I kind of wish I have everything written down. Maybe that could be my next project. But funny enough, I think part of me, like my previous planning was I'll just go through the sutra book and then I'm just gonna find the right thing. And it's like, oh, that's so good. I'm gonna look at Gita. And there was a lot of like back and forth of those planning. Now, the I think it really helped us going through the whole book once and twice and three times because like I don't know exactly what chapter and verse that is, but at the same time I can kind of guess like which area that I can look for. So there is that. But then also the idea of at least like not the sutra, there are too many different things going on, but Gita, the idea is like how do we do the next best thing? I think the whole book is about um I don't know if what Alex is gonna say, but like the whole book is about what can we do the next best thing, even if it's really difficult. Or like you don't agree with it in most cases, and you have doubts and you have questions, and how do we do with that? So that angle has been really easier for me to pull ideas out of it because every day you look around and there's so many things that you can pull out of and then weave into that direction. But I kind of have to go back to if I think about how do I shape this kind of a how do we do the next best thing into more everyday thing? I do writing a lot. Um, and that's kind of like how free writing and Sunday scaries and all of that stuff came about was one, my ADHD is not gonna let me just sit and meditate on ideas. I have to write it out. And then two, like there's a process of when you're writing things down and you're finding something that you didn't even think about. So I love those process to go through. Say, okay, so I really want to talk about sutra chapter, whatever, whatever. Let me read about it. Let me sit with it. Let me write about it. And let me kind of talk it through with my partner who has absolutely no interest in yoga. And can I apply to that? So there's a lot of those non-traditional yoga sense or non-meditation sense of like just playing those ideas around. Because at the end of the day, like the more and the more I teach, like the posture is a posture. It's a tool. It's a lot of it is about how do I go about that posture? If I hate it, why do I hate it? And if I hate it, what do I do with it, right? So it's really not about the posture. It's like how do we figure out our ideas and kind of morph it into something that is tangible for us. And sometimes that is posture, sometimes that is lying down, sometimes that's meditation, and sometimes that's writing. So I use the writing part to get into that philosophical part of it. Usually it doesn't come out as clean as Sutra or Gita or anything like that, because then my job is going to be a different job. But usually it comes out as like the little things that happens to me and to the others, like the post office thing the other day that I was telling everybody was about was a good example. It's like if post office was open 30 minutes late and everybody was losing their stuff online, so waiting in line, I'm just watching it. It's like, okay, that's a really interesting point. I should probably write about this. And then I should probably teach about this. So I didn't intend the writing part to be a part of my practice of teaching yoga, but it became a part of it eventually because like that was my way of gathering the ideas and forming the ideas and being able to communicate.
I love that. And like Sue does a great Substack. I'll put the links under the episode. And she sometimes has her dad as a guest writer. And I love writing, hearing from his point of view because it's so different from yours, sort of in a way, Like it's nice to have the juxtaposition, but Sue set this exercise. I do Sue's Sunday scaries. I'm always late, always behind with it. But I do it when I feel a bit stuck and I save it because I know there's going to be that moment where I feel a bit stuck. So then that's when I go, right, it's Sunday scaries time. And you'd set this exercise to write, and it's really important, free writing. I've really come round to it as well, just setting a little timer and off we go. Sometimes it's half a sentence, but mostly you're like, whoa. And then the
Yeah.
timer goes off and you're like, I'm not finished now. But you
What
said,
happened?
like,
What is that?
where you were like, you were asking us to explore this character, from our childhood or whatever. And I thought, like, I read a lot, but I didn't really have anything like that. But then I realized I also wanted to be prime minister. I don't know what's wrong with me. An introvert prime minister.
I'm like, how did you forget about that?
I
That's
know. Do you know, it
okay.
just came out like I was writing, and then I was like, "Whoa!" I just like there's me back in my room writing in my little diary because I always had these notebooks and like pretending to be the prime minister or whatever. I didn't play a lot of imaginary games, but then I was like, I am here doing like a policy science
Mm.
PhD. And I've done like very practical project work in the past, like a project manager doing actual delivery of things, and the policy always stopped us. And then I was like, oh my God, I'm not Prime Minister. Because sometimes I'm like, it's so uncomfortable, it's such a big challenge. what am I doing? I hate politics. It really irks me, but it's important. And then there's all these things. And then I was like, I wanted to be prime minister, and then here I am now.
Yeah,
Like, and
yeah,
I thought I
yeah,
hadn't got the
yeah,
loop because you're so busy
yeah,
doing the stuff. And it's
yeah,
like,
yeah.
then, and like you say, it's exactly that yoga moment where you realize these parts of yourself and these interactions that you're having, you know,
Mhm.
are part of this kind of ecosystem, is kind of how I think about it. So I can thoroughly recommend Sue,
Yeah.
both your writing, but also using these writing techniques to, work through some things that we would do in a yoga way. So yeah, I really, really thank you for that. It was great.
Yeah, yeah, you're welcome. And it's so interesting because the speaking of Sunday Scaries, the way the class is designed for introverts. So I got so many comments from folks about I don't need to see your faces. Like we're doing journaling, so or writing. Why do I need to see your faces? So if you want to turn the camera off and turn the camera off, and 99.9% of the time people turn their camera off. And what one of my students told me was like that was such a liberating thing because I'm on Zoom all the time and I have to show up.
Yeah.
I don't have to show up. That's great. But I have to show up. I want to show up, but I don't have to have my face on. So that was like a great kind of thing. But I'm like, that's just given. We're all introverts in a one way or the other. And we don't want to exert our energy on the stuff that we don't have to. So that was one thing. And the other thing that I really love about the circle is that I get this feedback and from you, Adele, or somebody else from the class, like way after we
Yeah.
do the practice, and then it would come in like in an email or like a Instagram DM or whatever, and then like I did the thing and this happened. And in my mind, I was like, when was that session? So I go back and think about, oh yeah, that thing. And then, because it's a monthly thing, it's like a kind of cadence that but I keep up with, but at the same time, a month is long. So what was that, 2 months ago? And then I get this kind of glimpse of the downloads that people are getting. And that download itself may not mean much to me personally, but it's not about me anyways, right? So the realization of like something happening in the background, you do a little bit of a boost of exercise. So I don't even call it exercise, like a 3 minute thing, 7 minute thing, or whatever. And then something opens up and you get the ideas and you get the action or you get to do something that you never thought about doing. That's a big joy for me. And part of it was like I was stuck in that too. And I wanted to get out of it and I didn't know how. So I'm just doing a lot of different things and see if it sticks. And a lot of the exercises that we do, it worked for me and it would work for my teachers and it worked for others. And let's just try it out. If it doesn't work, there's so many other things that we can do.
Yeah.
But it's more trial and error and go back at it, go back at it. Sometimes I ask for what, but for those ideas that comes up, which is just so great.
Yeah. It's great. It is great. And I think that probably takes us back round to what we were saying about um, tips for teachers and when they get that inkling that they want to break out of the box a little bit, like you
Mhm.
sort of find your toolbox along the way if you're dogged enough to
Yeah,
stick with it, you know? You think
absolutely.
like,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
And things, I don't know if you find it, but things like swing in and swing out. So like I've just done that pranayama series and that was a big surprise to me because I couldn't do breath work for ages. It was just too dizzying. And then suddenly I was like, oh, it's working again. So like, things sort of swing in and swing out, and then you sort of, yeah, get these downloads. I love that expression.
Mhm.
And then it sort
Mhm.
of takes on a new context and,
Mhm.
picking and choosing things. Like you say,
Yeah,
trying stuff doesn't work,
yeah.
leave it, but it doesn't mean it always won't work as well. So there's this element of keeping this fluidity. But yeah, it was just the Sunday Scaries is genuinely like we do, things that people would expect in a yoga class, but also the writing just
Yeah.
really does contribute to those moments that we often have, in asana classes. And then just before we were discussing, I thought it was really funny because yoga has become so prolifically defined by the shapes, that people make and the asana and, the additional
The
postures.
toes.
But like, it's so funny that people are kind of coming from this corporate land, myself included, where your brain floating around in a body you don't connect with, and then you're walking into yoga desperately moving a body and switching off the brain. And it's like quite two polar extremes. I hadn't thought of that before. You know, you're seeing,
Yeah. And I think there's a reason why I was so drawn to very kind of structured practice because I don't know how to move my body and my brain is like really busy. And if somebody tells me to do move your body freely, I will be walking out of that class, right? So it didn't work it wouldn't have worked because if I'm the student to my class right now, it would not work in a sense, right? So if you're coming in from that idea, but at the same time, um, I like to keep it a little bit structured, but kind of coming in and out of that structure. So a lot of my students know where I'm going with this because I have a same thing going on for the first 15 minutes. It's always pretty much the same. I may go at it differently. I may awkwardly joke about it a little differently, but it's pretty much the same thing. So they know what to do. So then, like from there, how do we kind of move things around so that it would be a little different, perhaps a little boring, a little interesting, whatnot. But I totally get like why was I so attached to like a fixed sequence of certain things? Because I know exactly what's going to happen next, whether I can do it or not. Like that was how I was drawn into yoga. And then from there, some part of me, I think is I call it like a I don't know, it's a rebellious or like just being being like I don't know, being a little weird about it is that why do I have to follow that role? So once you started to get to know about it and things are not working anymore, and I'm like, that doesn't work for me. So why do I have to do that? So there was a lot of kind of thinking process of that would never work. I would probably injure myself, but I'm supposed to be doing it at this 57-minute mark of a 90-minute class. But then like I don't want to not do that because that's gonna bother my teacher. You know, all of those kind of different things you start to kind of figure out what works for you and what doesn't work for you. And I think it took me a really long time to get to that place because I had to really know how to move the body or not know how to move the body. And then from there you get to like, oh, that doesn't work for me anymore,
yeah,
right? Or it never worked for me. And I can't really force myself into it. So then what is that, right? But I totally get it. Like there was a reason why I was attracted to certain type of practices. And sometimes I do too. Like sometimes funny enough, I went to the class, one of the classes that one of my teacher friend teaches the other day. So it was a vinyasa flow class, and there was like immense like emotional relief knowing that I knew where this person was going in exactly where this was person was kind of sequence was going, and it was such a comforting thing. But I was able to like not do certain things because that's not gonna work well for me for my body. Yeah, but as a student, it's a difficult thing to figure out when they first start to practice, for
yeah,
sure.
yeah, it's true. And I think what what I tend to do is like we're going to be doing kind of this. I give people the structure, and I think I always structure my classes because I have all sorts of people in my classes, and we do standing up to the floor, and when we're on the floor, we don't have to get up again till we're leaving, so people don't have to worry about up and down, because that can
Yeah.
be such a big
Oh
barrier,
yeah.
so.
Yeah.
But I used to teach kind of not vinyasas, but similar kind of fast, things that we all kind of go through the phase of that, don't we? I
Okay.
know. Of yeah. So you're developing this everyday movers kind of program, and how does that come off kind of some of these musings you've had around moving a body and how people move their bodies? How is that sort of come alive?
Yeah, I wanted to do this kind of I never thought about it this way, but now since we're talking about it, I wanted to create a kind of a twin of Sunday Scary's twin, but in a more of a movement specific way, where if you're new or if you're coming back to yoga and you never really felt right in going into the yoga in-person classes and just like everybody else is doing handstand, what am I doing? And like the innate nature, unfortunate, but it happens because we're people, right? We see each other and we compare each other without those pressure to perform. And what are the classes that I can shape around that? And it was such an interesting process because I was telling somebody about it. My gestation period of idea is really long. I think about it, I think about it, I think about it. And I think Sunday Scary Circle came out after like year and a half of thinking about it. So probably my business coaches are like, when is this person going to launch anything? Because they've been talking about it forever. So I tend to do that. I've been thinking about this for a long time, almost to a point everybody that I know knows about it, but like I didn't really say it out loud, which is, it's gonna have to happen very soon. I'm launching. Um, it's gonna start on June 10th, so I'm gonna be launching next week. But the interesting process that I wanted to think about, and this really helped my writing and everything related to that was initially I was thinking structured way, right? So I'm teaching body practice in a long time, and how do I structure that? Spine, core, hips, that kind of a way, and then nothing was coming to me. Absolutely nothing. I cannot teach anything. I cannot think of any plan or any writing. I can't do anything about it. So I sat with it again, for a long time. And then one day, like this is when the non-yoga friends are so helpful, right? Because they will give you the idea of lifetime and they don't even know about it. And I'm not gonna credit them, but one of my friend goes, I don't know. Like, that's not how you do things anyways, is it? You never teach a class about spine or whatever. You may have a focus about it and the postures might be related to that, but you never teach that. So how about don't do it that way? And I was like, then what is it, right? Then what is it? So I started to think about what are the things that people care about or what stops them from creating a consistent practice? Obviously, consistent practice is it like 5 days a week in Ashtanga practice? That's not what I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about like, okay, what are the available tools that you can get into, and what are those practices, consistent practices? And then I thought about the three things. One is it's really hard to start something, right? It's really hard to start. Like you're thinking about it, yoga's good for me. I want to move my body, but it's really hard to walk into that yoga room or virtual yoga room. So that's how to start anything is the first step. And then second step is so okay, so you started something, you're going on with the flow, but then you get stuck. I don't know how to do this. It doesn't feel right. Or like I don't feel I fit in. So there will be the obstacles of like what to do, like you're gonna get stuck. So that was a second point of like what to do when you're stuck. And the last bit of like, okay, I figure out how to get out of this stuckness and this funk. And how do I keep this thing going without really attaching to every day? Like I have to do this every day. If I don't, like I'm a miserable person. None of that. Like how do I do that? So that's how I came about. And then it starts to just happen. Because like that was not like the spine and core and hip was not the way that my brain wanted to think about this. So those are the three parts. Hour and 15-minute practice, depending on I might add on to hour and 30 optionally. But we're gonna be talking about how to start anything when you don't really have a lot of yoga tools just yet. So, what can we do seated? What can we do lying down? What can we do when we're in this situation so that you're kind of moving just a little bit, getting into the concept of movement and the yoga? And the second part, what to do when you're stuck, is like, okay, how do I like I don't have this. Like, what do I do? So it's like it's gonna be a lot of prop or how to use everyday kind of object to do the body movement or decide not to and just play around with those concepts. And the last one is it's more of a like how do I create this little bits and pieces of practice as my own? And there's a repetition piece of it. There's kind of understanding the science behind it, how to make that kind of into your practice every day. So that's how I framed it.
Yeah,
And it's launching pretty soon.
that's it. I know not to put pressure on your launch dates.
And that's the pressure. Like I need to start get going.
Well, I love that. I love the way you've kind of logicked that because, yeah, working in a gym and things like that as well, it's just getting through the door is so tough for folks. Um, and you're offering it online, aren't you? It's an online
Yeah,
offering. Yeah.
it's
And
an
I think
online class.
that's
Yeah.
great. And it's great
Mm.
because it's such a good way because you're in the comfort of your own space sometimes. And like you say, you don't have to put the camera on if you don't want to. You get to rewatch things and go through
Yeah.
things in your own time. And, we keep having this debate about in person and online, but they're just same way of, they're different ways of delivering similar things. And like you say, like it can make it really accessible for people. I kind of point this out that not everyone's in a town with a yoga studio in it. And the yoga that
Mhm.
you do online, not any
Mhm.
less than the yoga you would get in a studio. Sometimes it's allowed me
Mhm.
access in a very rural place to like
Yeah.
amazing
Yeah.
teachers I would not
Yeah.
not be able to
Yeah,
access.
it's such a lovely thing to be able to meet people. Meet, I call it like a silently meet in our little squares. People in all over the place, right? I have students coming from Europe, I have students coming from Asia, students from US, and it's all diverse. And I think it's like we're teaching the same thing in a different angle, right? When you're in online space, there's so many different tools that you can tap into when you're kind of moving around and like having to like see so many things. Like I think as a sensory overload standpoint, like that always I struggle with that. Um, so, and then also the availability of accessing the things over and over again is really helpful, or at least the idea of it.
Mhm.
Because like when you start kind of thinking about this is the only class that I can take that from this person and this is it, that scarcity makes everything a little bit more difficult. And having a place of like, I may not watch that again, but I have an access to it and I know where to go and find it. I think that gives me as a student a lot of comfort to like not be too attached to everything that is happening at me because then I don't really see what's coming at me in that way. Like I'm just trying to grab every single information.
Yeah,
That's not how we learn. So giving a little bit of a space for our brain to process things or our body to process things and then kind of make that going as a learning process is more important than anything else.
yeah,
So yeah, I really love online teaching as well as online learning. Although sometimes like I feel like, oh, that like I have to hop on a thing again. But then like what is so different, right? I used to do this like 12, 13 hours a day. So there's nothing different for me anyways. So yeah, there's that. I love both,
yeah.
but it's a different thing that we do, teaching in person and online.
I know they're very different things, and now, like when I teach in person now, I tend to just do it in small groups, because the big group is very, I loved it at the time, but it's just quite a lot of other peopling,
Mhm.
and like I find
Mhm.
now that you kind of get this much more personalized.
Yeah.
I could take a personalized approach, but not have it being awkward with just one other person as well.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
get
yeah.
that little bit of the, yeah,
Yeah, and you have a really good point about that because I think I'm the same person, but other part of me comes out more in in-person classes versus in online. Like this is what you see, this is what I would teach, right? How I would talk to people. And I think it's a matter of like what do you resonate more with, right? And there's a limitation as to how much I can show up the in-person environment, just given the fact that just you mentioned there are a lot of people and I have to kind of figure out my energy to show up in the most optimal way. And in online, there's a less of that. So I feel at ease in terms of like making that personalized and then more like a conversational way, and then being a little goofy about it and all of that stuff could happen in this setting. So yeah, but it's the same person, but you're just getting a
yeah.
little slightly different version of it.
That sounds great. And I think even like I've been teaching for quite some time, and even with students who come often or have come for a decade or whatever, going back to the beginning, they always would be the groans. It's like the same when you get the chairs out
Oh
for, we're
yeah.
going back to basics today. And I think there's just something so humbling. And as well, if there's teachers out there who have lost their practice a little bit, which is so common to happen, like tapping into like beginners sessions,
Oh yeah.
quote unquote. It's like so humbling, and it's a really good place to come back round because it kind of reminds you, I find other people have different experiences of why you sort of did it in the first place. And it's a really good way to step your foot in. I feel it's like the guilty secret for yoga teachers, like it's difficult
Mhm,
to get your
mhm.
practice in, but it's
Oh
the
yeah,
same,
yeah.
PTs and
Yeah,
people.
and I totally agree with that because like one of my teacher, Jason Crandall, talks a lot about this, and I really resonate with it. As a yoga teacher, you've done this, probably Warrior Two 700 times, or then and then some. We get a little bit detached from how the other students feel in their body if they're first showing up. And his advice, which I probably gonna cherish my whole life, is that do something new that you're not good at. So my attempt at sewing, my attempt at different crafts, my attempt at gardening, which I failed miserably, by the way, all of that is like I don't know everything, and my students might feel that way. And how do I make that not as a like a kind of a just don't know anything, I feel miserable, but more like, hey, you're just starting things out. Of course, we are not like all Wikipedia about this. But then how do I go about that uncomfortable feeling? Because I think there's so much learning about that uncomfortableness. And then because you're gonna have to do this anyways in other aspects of your life, you're gonna have to meet new people, meet new things and learn new things. And how do we go about that? I think that's more of a yoga practice that I would like to do, like to hopefully teach others. And then, but if I need to teach that, I should be able to like try those things and see like I'm just horrible at this gardening thing, or I'm just horrible at the other things. But then you learn from that experience, I feel. And then it kind of helps you to move on to something else and see like, okay, I'm just not good at it again. And that's okay. That's okay. That's
Yeah,
okay.
it's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you looped it right back to the philosophy. It's so true. It's just so, yeah, good to go and do things that you feel that you're not good at. And like, that you can have a bit of fun, like trying out and experiment and yeah, see how it goes. Yeah, it sounds
Yeah.
great. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
yeah, awesome. So I don't know if there's anything on the tip of your tongue, Sue, that you've want to say on out loud or anything.
I mean, we're all coming from our teachers' learnings, and I was so glad to meet some of my teachers, Alex included, early in my teaching career that just kind of shaped me to where I am. And also at the same time, knowing that new teachers, especially, you're going to be that person to somebody else, right? So don't just discount yourself as like, oh, I don't know anything. I feel so impostery and all of that stuff. Like you're going to be that person to somebody else too. And it doesn't have to be life-changing, transforming way. It could be that one moment that person needed to hear or like that person needed to feel, right? So my last tip, and probably reiterating the tips that I said was like, if you feel awkward, just say it. And just be awkward.
Yeah,
Who cares? Awkward. And then just face that in a beginner's mind.
yeah,
The fear is always there and just be slightly better about it is how I would put it. Yeah. And then the rest of it, the repetition and the time will take care of it. Yeah.
it's true. That's great. And I think there's something about being a little bit awkward that people find quite approachable. So it actually becomes a really good skill. Like you're just a normal human being, like
I
every
never thought of it that
I
way.
feel like
I
that.
never thought about it.
I've never been like that one that's like a mystical person who floats
Yeah.
in and out. I just do weird stuff like anybody else.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
So true. And yeah, just that bit about, it takes time and you've got to go through this process. And I do wonder sometimes we've kind of lost that little bit, not like an apprenticeship, but you come out your teacher training and boof, you're thrown into a studio, suddenly you've got this. I also remember this feeling of like when I did taught my first class, I was like, right, everyone arms up, and everyone did it. And I just felt this huge surge of responsibility. I was like, they all just did what I asked, like, and then suddenly it becomes about like crowd control and other aspect health and safety things. So there's a whole load of stuff about managing that space we wish you don't really
Hmm.
have to worry about online, but it comes over time, and some of us were lucky
Yeah,
to have people mentor us through that process. But I do wonder, if
yeah.
students now, they got to figure a lot of this out on their own
Right,
as they go.
especially after coming out of pandemic, right? Everybody
Yeah,
got a little more awkward about everything.
yeah.
And then how do you navigate that? But then like I love talking to new teachers about like who am I to give advice per se, but at the same time like hey, that's okay. We'll get through this. Like and comforting to know that my teachers, like 20, 25 years teaching, they also say the same thing when they first show up to the same, like, new crowd, they feel anxious.
Hmm.
So good to know that it's just a process of everybody goes through the similar thing. And then it's just a matter of like how we show up to that. So
Yeah,
there's a little bit of a kind of, I guess, brighter side in that it's just gonna be anxious and awkward and no matter what. So yeah,
yeah. Just
it
go
is
for
a
it.
learning pattern. Yeah, it's
Awesome.
gonna be awkward.
Wonderful. Great insights. Love it.
Thank you.